So if we're going to make sure that we're not shielding students from the unpleasant parts of life and only exposing them to the pleasant parts of life, what this then means is that we can, of course, take them to sanitized museums in prosperous neighborhoods, but we should also be taking them on field trips to poverty-stricken neighborhoods. It certainly is fine to have the students read stories about adventure and heroes and so forth, but we should also have them be reading stories about kids from broken homes and so on. Now, none of this is to say that the existentialists are not sensitive to age appropriateness here, right? So obviously it's inappropriate to take huge, crushing adult problems and lay those on 5-year-olds and expect them to be able to handle it. So what we need to do as existentialist educators is to bring in pain and death and suffering on a scale and in a way that students can handle cognitively and emotionally. So some examples here. We do know, of course, that students are engaged with a certain amount of pain and suffering in their own lives, right? Some of them fall down and skin their knees, they break their arms, they're dealing with schoolyard bullies and so on. Those should be teaching moments for us. But we can go a step further and build in stylized teaching moments. For example, one practice some existentialist teachers will use is, say, we're dealing with 7-year-olds. We might give them a choice. We would say, here, if you would like, here's a plant that you can look after, or here's a little goldfish in a bowl. You can have this responsibility. And give the students a choice. Would you like a plant, or would you like to look after a goldfish? And so the student, say, chooses a goldfish. Well, the student has made a choice, has made a commitment here, and the student then also knows that there's responsibility. The goldfish needs to be fed every once in a while, the water should be changed, and so forth. It can't be put in full sunlight or in a place that's too cold. So here we have choice and commitment and responsibility, right, and that's a beautiful thing. And so the student takes on the project of looking after the goldfish. But we know, if you're talking about 7-year-olds, how they are with that kind of responsibility, and so in the back of our teacher minds, we know that at some point down the road, not too far, the student is going to come in one day, and sure enough, there's the goldfish belly up, having died in the little fish bowl there. The student naturally is distraught. We go over, we comfort the student, but this is a teaching moment, and we're ready to rock and roll, so to speak, at this teaching moment, because this was a choice the student made. There's a responsibility and a commitment that was made here, and now there's an opportunity for assessment. Well, why did the goldfish die? Was the goldfish not fed? Was the water not changed? Was it put in too warm a place, right, and so forth? And so we are using this death education, right, as a way of teaching all of these core existentialist themes, but at the same time exposing the child to death in a very personal kind of fashion, but also on a scale that the child can handle, right? The child is disappointed, but it's only a goldfish, right? And if we've done that with the goldfish, then when the family pet dies, that's a larger deal, but the groundwork has been laid, right, and so forth. Then for older students, not necessarily dealing with goldfish, we can have them, for example, do a great deal of journaling. We might have them read a story that involves some sense of death, and have them write about what their thoughts and what their feelings are in response to this character's death. Again, that is something on a scale that they can handle, right? It's a fictional person perhaps who has died, so it doesn't have that element of reality, but nonetheless the feelings and thoughts that they have that are real, and helping the students articulate and work through those thoughts and feelings is something that is a useful exercise. When students get a little bit older, we can, for example, start bringing in newspapers right into the class, or headlines and articles from internet publications. All of the regular news about what's going on around the world. We can have them read the headlines. There's been, in most cities, a shooting and someone has died. There's been a gang warfare incident. There has been a famine, right, in some part of the world. There is a war in some other part of the world. So the students then become aware, perhaps now they are in high school, about the broader world and the darker things that are happening all around the world, and we use those as opportunities for discussion, right? And of course we can fold in lots of other curricular elements, right? History and politics and economics, and other social factors and religions, etc. But again, we are teaching the students in a classroom how to deal with intellectually the reality of the darkness of the world. And so we can then, for example, also take them on field trips to museums that are perhaps memorials, so memorials to people who have died in various sorts of wars or as a result of certain kinds of holocausts. And another possibility certainly is to take the students on a field trip to a graveyard. This may sound a little bit morbid, and there's nothing pleasant necessarily about a graveyard. But again, it's a way of making real to them in a somewhat artificial fashion the reality of death, the actual people who lived and died, and to reflect on and work through the feelings about what death involves. After all, as the existentialists say, we all will end up in the graveyard, right, at some point. And the grave is a fine and quiet place, but none, I think, do there embrace, quoting some poetry. The point then for us as existentialist educators is to get us to embrace the world, to have students embrace the world, the real world, right, in all of its brutality and tainted beauty, and to do it now.